Let's have a look. You're too far left, Fernando.
Yeah.
You're too far left, yeah.
You said he was doing aggressive burnouts, Martin.
He was, but he's too... They've really tightened up on this, haven't they?
2.4 seconds stationary for Sergio Perez, which was a neat stop indeed. This wait will feel like an eternity now for Fernando Alonso and the Aston Martin team, who practice well and get their man out.
Yep. This is another case of the FIA being the most incompetent governing body in all of sports. Throughout the entirety of that race, Fernando Alonso had driven superbly well. He got the jump on Checo at the start before being re-overtaken due to their inferior straight line speed. Then, he managed his pace well throughout both stints to take his 100th podium in Formula 1. But the FIA had something different to say about that. First, let's get into the incident regarding him starting out of his grid position, because this was a slam dunk decision. Okay, so quick side note, I actually saw this screenshot on Twitter showing an Alfa Romeo also seemingly out of position on the grid. So yeah, more inconsistencies. The first time we saw a rule clarification on this was back in 2017 at the Chinese Grand Prix. With one side of the track being damper than the other, Vettel decided to place his car in a way that avoided either side of the white lines to prevent wheel spinning off the start. Charlie Whiting decided to give Vettel the benefit of the doubt, given how rare such occurrences were, and the fact that at least half the grid was starting out of position. The issue was raised in the driver briefing at the following race in Bahrain, and as a result, clarifications regarding this were addressed. Now, back to Alonso. I'm not mad at the fact that he got the 5-second penalty, as it's consistent with what the stewards have already done this season. Esteban Ocon did the same during the season opener and received the same penalty. In addition to this, he received a further 10 seconds as the mechanic started working on his car 0.4 of a second before they were allowed to. Again, Fernando's penalties were consistent with that. But regardless, for the stewards to make a decision after the race was already done and dusted is completely absurd. What's even worse is their justification as to why they did so. According to the document released regarding the reason behind Alonso's penalty, originally they determined that no work was done on the car before the 5 seconds were up, and so they didn't investigate any further. Then apparently on the last lap, the stewards received a report from race control that they hadn't served the penalty correctly and thus imposed a sanction. They could have even gone as far as disqualifying Fernando, even though it was their own inability to properly steward that led to such a late call in the first place. But they decided to go with what they gave Ocon in Bahrain, which I guess was fair enough. Although such a situation doesn't give the driver an opportunity to do something about it when the Grand Prix is still going on. And as a result, you get this complicated situation where a driver may lose a podium and they can do nothing to change that. However, this isn't something that hasn't been seen before. For example, Max Verstappen losing his podium in Austin 2017 for cutting the corner on the last lap to overtake Raikkonen. Another example involving the Dutchman is Mexico 2016, as Sebastian Vettel inherited the final podium spot. But these incidents occurred pretty late on, so one can understand the delay in finalizing a decision post-race. The Alonso situation, though, was significantly different. Could he have pulled out those 10 seconds if he was given the required information? That's another question. But the fact that he didn't even get the chance to do so is pretty dumb. But ultimately, it didn't matter. He still ended up getting the podium reinstated, which he rightfully deserved after Aston Martin's successful appeal. It consisted of them presenting the FIA with 7 different instances where the rear jack made contact with the car before the penalty was served, and no penalty was given. Again, this isn't the first time in recent history that the FIA have made a mockery of decision making. During last year's Singapore Grand Prix, Sergio Perez was found to have fallen too far behind the safety car. The investigation went on well after the race was over, and they came to the conclusion that Checo was only deserving of a 5-second penalty, despite committing the offence on 3 separate occasions. A reprimand was given for the first, then a warning for the second, and finally 5 seconds for the third one. Pretty convenient, considering they knew that Leclerc had finished 7.5 seconds behind him. I mean, they weren't so lenient with Lewis in Sochi 2020, where he got penalised twice for doing practice starts in the wrong place. No warning, no reprimand, just a straight 10-second penalty. So, what all of this points to is one of two things. Either the FIA have absolutely no backbone as an organisation, as teams have too much control over the outcome of a result, or they lack so much competency that they're just not capable of governing Formula One to an acceptable standard. And I think it's a combination of both. Let me make it clear that they were 100% correct to overturn the Alonso decision. But we didn't need this mess in the first place had they done their job correctly. If they don't have a process rigorous enough to apply the rules as they should, then they're not fit to be in control. That very same race, we saw a safety car brought out when one wasn't needed due to an issue with their GPS system, which indicated that Stroll's car was still on track. So is nobody watching the live feed at all then? Well, you'd have to assume that, given even we could see Stroll's car was well off the circuit. And these cracks that we keep seeing over and over again are a genuine cause for concern. If it took Aston Martin providing so much evidence to get back a podium that Alonso rightfully earned, then what does that say about how the rules are being enforced? Because let's not get it twisted, the problem is not with the rules themselves. They're there in black and white, written clearly for everyone to see. The problem is with the ones implementing said rules. Aston shouldn't have needed to appeal had the FIA done their job. And the more they keep proving to be inadequate rule enforcers, the less reputable the sport becomes. Also, it's nice to know that the FIA can overturn decisions after a race. Well, only if it fits their motives, I guess. But all this to say, I understand that some rules need clarification. With the wording of certain parts of the regulations being relatively ambiguous, it's important to neaten up their meaning. In this case, someone's definition of working on the car may be completely different to another person. And in that case, it's important to evaluate similar offences committed in the past and hand out a fitting penalty. This one paragraph in particular highlights the sheer confusion that normally goes on in the stewards room. Having reviewed the new evidence, we concluded that there was no clear agreement, as was suggested to the stewards previously, that could be relied upon to determine that parties had agreed that a jack touching the car would amount to working on a car. Bruh, so if you weren't 100% certain on that, why even give out a penalty in the first place? And I understand mistakes are made and can be corrected. But when you start seeing the same dysfunction popping up, you start to notice a pattern and view the people running the organization a certain way. How long will this continue then? For as long as they're regulating Formula One, I don't see it ever getting better. Stewarding inconsistencies have always been a problem, but only recently have they become an utter joke, and the path we're going down with it is not a promising one. More than anything though, I feel for the drivers. To work so hard and not know whether you'll get what you deserve due to some foolishness that's out of your control is extremely frustrating. But hey, that's the current state of Formula One. Besides all the stuff surrounding the stewarding, I want to point out once again how well Aston Martin have done to start this year. To start the season with 2 back-to-back podiums after not scoring a single point in the opening couple of rounds last year is an insane level up. To say that Fernando is driving well would be an understatement. He's fully taking advantage of every opportunity that presents itself this season, and if all comes together for just one weekend, I wouldn't be surprised if he won a race. That would definitely be something. But right now, the Red Bulls are in a completely different stratosphere, which will be the topic of my next video. But until then, it's going to be a lot of working from every team to hunt them down. And with Aston Martin possessing the most amount of available wind tunnel time out of the top 4 teams, they have a pretty good chance at doing that. I hope you all enjoyed. If you did, be sure to give the video a like, share it around with your friends, and subscribe to the channel with bell notifications to keep up to date with my latest videos in the future. Let me know what you think about the current state of stewarding in the comment section below, and as always, I'll see you in the next one.